Welcome to the Public Works Nerds Podcast.
Welcome to the Public Works Nerds Podcast, a Public Works podcast of the nerds, by the nerds, and for the nerds. I'm your host, Mark Culver. Today we are unplugged with Deb Heiser and Richard McCoy. This will be our second attempt at this unplugged kind of freewheeling, I won't say what Richard said, but freewheeling episode where we just kind of talk about stuff. We're going to go off script. We can see if we can have a little fun talking about public works related items in the news, recap some of our recent episodes, and maybe get some additional insight into public works in general. Like I said, joining me today are Deb Heiser, engineer director for the City of St. Louis Park.
Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon, Deb. And Richard McCoy, Public Works Director and City Engineer for the City of Robbinsdale.
Thanks for having me back.
You know, you made the
I must
cut.
have behaved myself.
Yeah.
Did you just call me the Public Works Director?
No, I think I said engineer director. Did I not say engineer? If I did not say engineer director.
I thought you gave me another title. I apologize.
No, I wouldn't do that to Jay. No.
No, sounds good. Don't do that to Jay. He's doing a great job.
So, yes. So, yeah, it's just the three of us today. Maybe that results in a shorter episode. Maybe it results in a longer episode. I don't know. But let's kick this off. So, how you guys doing? How's life treating you?
I don't know. I think Richard might be having a really good week. But
Well, it's busy as usual, but good news on, when was that, Tuesday? About the National Award for the Water Treatment Plant. Woohoo.
Yeah, was that APWA? Or?
That was APWA.
Awesome.
Yeah, Project of the Year in the Small Cities, Rural Communities environmental category.
Wow.
So,
Very pleased.
That's awesome. So some more hardware. You're going to have to build a bigger shelf. Yeah.
Well, the staff have got the other three up on the wall already, and they just have to make room for the fourth, I guess.
Yeah. Well, good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think it was a well-deserved. I was sharing with Mark before we started talking is that it's a very well-deserved award for not only what you did, but I will just say that Richard writes a mean nomination form. I had the pleasure of reading the nomination when I was reviewing it for the executive committee for SEAM. So
that's helpful.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you got going on?
Well, it's been a pretty busy week. My favorite part of the week, though, is that spring is here, and so I've been gardening. So that's maybe not public works nerdy enough, but hey, it's Minnesota in the spring.
Into public works, right?
Yeah,
it is actually probably very much a gateway. It's all about maintenance,
Yep.
making sure everything's working well.
digging.
And pollinator gardens, and of
Right.
course.
Right.
So, but yeah, I've had a really good week. We had a council meeting on Wednesday. And a lot of great conversations being had with that. So I don't have anything quite as exciting as Richard. Oh, construction. This is our pavement management. So our annual local street reconstruction actually started work last Wednesday. And this is the earliest.
That's pretty early.
My last year at Roseville, we started the last week of April. But this is the first time we've ever started in mid-April. So it's been a real unique year. So that's
when
exciting.
is it mid versus end?
End is the last week.
The last week. So,
Yeah, it's like this week versus this Sunday versus next
when
Sunday.
did they start?
They started Wednesday the let's see, today's the 26th, so it would Wednesday the
Okay.
Wednesday the 17th.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're in the teens, you're still in
Yeah,
mid.
you're still in
Okay.
the teens,
All
yeah.
right. I'll go with that. All right.
So-
I was just going to challenge you.
Is that an official definition then?
Well, there needs to be. We need to have clear
we do.
demarcations here on this.
Specifications.
Yes.
Clear communication is what we're all about.
Right. So, well, good. I don't have anything as exciting. Both my kids are going to college, so my wife and I have been darting around the country, touring colleges with our kids, our respective children. My youngest will be a freshman in college next year, and my son is going to be a junior somewhere. So that's kind of been dictating my thoughts and time lately. But from a work perspective, working on a really cool project with the city of Shakopee. They're doing a really extensive riverbank restoration project. They got a whole bunch of grant funds. So Tim Olson from Bolton and Mankir and Josh Shields, those two and I are kind of managing this really large scale project, and Shakopee's got this park along the riverbank. Alex Jordan, hoping to get him on a podcast episode sometime soon. But Alex Jordan, city engineer at Shakopee, so working with him. But they have this really pretty nice park adjacent to the riverfront there. And we're trying to figure out how to do this riverbank restoration and shoreline protection, and then tie the park into that. So, it's just a really fun, kind of, I would say, eclectic project to work on, bringing in a lot of different elements, and, working on a park. Who'd have thought I would be working on that they even let me?
Parks are where you put stormwater, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Oh no! I mean, I'm not. I mean that it's a great synergy that can happen with parks.
Yes.
We have on our project the Cedar Lake Road, Louisiana project that's going to be starting this year. It's a 3-year, $28 million project. We are putting an underground chamber in a park along the corridor in order to meet the infiltration and create do some flood storage, as well as do infiltration, water quality. But it's great to be able to put that underneath that space. We don't have to buy easements.
Yep.
We had compared two places. We're working on putting it under a parking lot along the corridor, and we were negotiating, and it was going to be $600,000 to be able to get that easement. And so we're like, let's put it under the park.
Yeah.
So, but it's a great synergy. We can redo the fields. We can, and we put a skate park on top of one of these in St. Louis Park. We put in a 1 acre-foot underground chamber for treatment, and we built a skate park on top of it.
That's cool.
It was kind of fun to, that people probably don't even know what's underneath that skate park unless they saw it built like I did.
Right.
But it's a great synergy that can happen with that public
Plastic,
land.
metal, or you don't care?
We've been using concrete, so they're
That's
these
serious.
are you can walk through
Storm
them.
trap, is
These
it?
these are actually chambers.
Yeah.
They're 12 foot by 12 foot.
So they're like massive culverts.
Yeah, massive culverts.
Wow.
Making sure you have enough access for them so you can clean them up. And we actually do have a filter system to remove phosphorus, and we have cartridges we have to replace every 3-4 years, whatever the case may be, depending on how much water goes through there.
Nice.
But it's a great partnership that we can have with our Parks Department. And it saves the public money, really.
Yeah.
So works well.
That's cool. Well done.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you got some watershed funding for that, or
No, actually, those our city council is very committed to being a leader in environmental stewardship. The idea is we are a first-ring suburb, and when that happens, all the pipes were put in to move the water away, and we are part of Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, and our probably 2/3, maybe even 3/4 of our city drain to Minnehaha Creek, Bede-Makaska, and just making sure that we can do our loading reductions. And really, we usually go above and beyond when we build these things.
Yeah.
And so our council is really committed to ensuring not only flood protection, but that water quality, making sure we have cleaner water leaving our city.
awesome.
So,
Well, good for you. Good for your council.
yeah.
That's good to hear. Anything else like topical or recent for you guys?
Recent, man.
Work-wise.
Whatever. You want to talk about your cat?
No, I don't want to talk about the cat.
We could create a whole Instagram account
No.
for the public for
No.
her.
When you mentioned your kids are looking at college, I got in 2 weeks, my middle kid will be graduating.
Wow, college?
Yep.
From where?
Iowa State.
Awesome. Everybody's going to Iowa State. Good for Iowa State, but well, good. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Degree in.
Degree in forestry
Okay.
with a minor in animal ecology.
Awesome.
So is that 2 foresters you have in your daughter is also?
No, that's who's graduating.
Oh, she's actually graduating. Forgive me. I thought she was already graduating.
No, she's graduating in May the 11th, May 10th, 11th, something like that.
Cool. Well, good for her. Does she have a job?
Yep.
Where?
With Davy Tree.
Oh, okay. Davy Resource Group. Yeah.
So she'll learn some or develop her skills a bit further with them. I think ultimately she'd like to be a city forester.
Fantastic. You know what that is? That is a fantastic segue
2.
into one of the recaps for one of the episodes, recent episodes. And that was with Hannibal Hayes who is the city forester for the city of Minnetonka. And I'm sure Hannibal would be a great resource and connection point for your daughter. I mean, you are too, I'm sure. You've got lots of people to help her find a job ultimately when she wants to do that. But and Hannibal, I invited him to be on this Nerds Unplugged, and he was really, really disappointed that he couldn't join us today. But I really enjoyed that conversation I had with Hannibal. He's a really interesting guy, just in general. But just to talk about some of the technology, that they are looking to use, that's out there, that's evolving for city forestry. So I don't know how engaged are you with forestry in Robbinsdale? Like how proactive are you guys with that?
Well, the forestry is under my control as part of the public works engineering team. Our forester has done a sensational job with emerald ash borer.
Yeah.
He has been on top of that for many, many years. We haven't lost a single public ash tree to emerald ash borer. There's been obviously some private trees that have been chewed up by the bug, but he has been getting around now. He's probably on like his third rotation of working on the ash trees in the public realm, injecting them with insecticide to protect them from the borer.
Wow.
So he felt that was important to keep the diversity of species that we have in the urban forest. So he's done a really good job on that.
Do you guys expect that at some point you're going to lose them despite your efforts, or is this a really long-term effort to keep them?
I mean, I think we are committed to it long term.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to see the behavior of the bug as time goes on.
Yeah.
We had that very noticeable wave that came through that kind of jumped from city to city and decimated ash populations. Now, whether the numbers of the bugs drop off, seeing that there's not as many ash trees for them to feast on as they continue to march their way west. I guess we'll just have to keep an eye on that. And, we might go from treating every 3 years to be able to treat every 5 years or something. I don't know. That's still to be worked out as we monitor what the movement of the bug is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting point on that. And I guess I haven't really considered it from the perspective of beyond that front wave or first wave of the pest moving through, what is behind? Like how likely is it for it to move backwards, so to speak? If we're eradicating the habitat or treating the habitat for them, it's kind of an interesting question. However, there's also a lot of trees on, like as you mentioned, on private land that's not necessarily being treated. I know, and I mentioned this in the podcast with Hannibal, but because of our changing climate, I know the emerald ash borer is moving further north than we thought it would. It's getting up into the forests in northern Minnesota, so it's going to be interesting to see how the impact there. But yeah, I plan to have an episode in the near future focused on emerald ash borer. Hoping to get, and maybe by saying this out loud on the podcast, I'll commit him to this. But Matt Johnson, who's the current public works or the current Parks and Rec director at the City of Roseville, Roseville had a very kind of taking a little bit of an opposite approach. They're treating the really large trees, but being very proactive about the removal and replacement of trees. So they had a multi-year program contract with Tree Trust for removing the trees, replacing them, and things like that. So I'm going to get him in there to kind of talk about how they manage that.
And that's more similar to the way St. Louis Park is managing it. So first and foremost, we've not been so fortunate. We actually have had quite a bit we've had to remove because they were infested, quite a few trees being infested. And again, getting that word out, educating the residents about what we're doing and why.
Yep.
We've been treating our ash trees in the right of way, anything over 10 inches, but we have a contract with Rainbow Tree Care. And one of the things that we do is that we treat the ones that are healthy. We also extend a discount to our residents. So if they have an ash on their property and they want to treat, they can reach out to the city and they can kind of get on with our contract with Rainbow Tree Care. Yeah, we're just starting some additional removals in the right of way right now. But again, it's about diversifying. It's about getting different types and different species of trees in the right of way to replace them. It's hard. It's every time you get another one of these, it's a hard way to manage, and it's hard to see a mature tree.
What's next?
Yeah, what's next?
You know?
I mean, we had why can't you?
Dutch elm.
Dutch elm in the 70s. I remember that going to visit my grandma in Minneapolis, and this is all the trees were gone.
Yeah.
So when you look at this, what's next? What's the next bug that's going to make it because of climate change up into our area? And it was such a warm winter. That didn't help at all either.
Right.
So.
Right.
But yeah, again, we've got a great Michael Baugh, who's our forester, our natural resources, who actually Richard's daughter was one of our interns last year.
Oh, cool.
And he's doing a great job just trying to work through that with the messaging, working through it with the community, and managing it. So, and it's a question of resources too, because if you want to cut those trees down, that's cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, besides the loss of the tree,
yes.
yeah, there is the cost of it and how do you dispose of it. And that was another interesting element of Hannibal's podcast is, they're kind of unorthodox, method of getting rid of the trees, of what do you do once the tree is cut down and having their own mill. And
that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That is
cool.
very cool.
Yeah.
I would love for our city to have something like that. That is so nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what a great way to, at least figure out a way for that tree to live on, versus just grinding it up.
Well, and if you could put it into the buildings, use it for park benches or whatever the case may be, that you can. I just thought it was a really innovative.
Yeah, there's been a few developments up in Robbinsdale where unfortunately some large oaks have had to be removed, and being able to reuse that wood would have been absolutely sensational.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we had a Bridgewater, a new building that was built, I think it was about 4 or 5 years, or excuse me, the Quentin, it's an apartment on the north side of town. The developer actually, the trees that were cut down, reused the wood in the lobby.
That's cool.
It was kind of a neat way to approach that.
That is really good.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, and I'll just close that episode up by asking you guys, part of that episode, most of that episode was talking about the technology and using AI and some things like that. I'm assuming you guys have a tree inventory and your GIS systems. And
what we've started to do, and again, we talked about the AI, our last Unplugged. I'm still just so fascinated by this idea of driving and being able to have that health in that species and all of the above. One of the things I have as a gardener, I have an app on my phone that I can identify plants with. And it's really cool that this is so much easier at your fingertips and all of the above. But one of the things that we've started doing is we have a Green Corps member working through getting our inventories and getting that on GS, getting those updated. But what engineering has started is we will contract on every single one of our street projects, and we will do an inventory of all the trees, health species, all the above, and we will supplement it. So, if you're doing 5 miles of road or whatever the case may be, we can help keep that current and help out our forestry. And so we started doing that 2 years ago.
That's great.
Where we've, Mike tells us what we need, what he needs for his inventory, and we contract out and use project funds for that to kind of help supplement. So
cool.
Yeah.
That's good.
We've got a pretty good Stefan, our forester's done a really good job with the inventory. He takes out his tablet and updates it using Collector or whatever the software is these days for that. So he's got live updates whenever he's doing work on trees and what have you. We haven't delved too much into the AI. He's got some good kind of street view type software that when he's talking to residents, he can hop in there and he gets a good vision of what's going on, so we can talk to the resident about the trees on their property. It's always interesting when it's street reconstruction time because Stefan loves his trees, and sadly some of the trees need to be removed to facilitate deep utility construction and service line reconstruction and what have you. But we try and work around his trees wherever we can, particularly the large and good-looking mature type trees. Sometimes we can't. At the end of the project, Stefan can come back in and revegetate with trees as he sees fit.
As a part of one of our alley projects 2 years ago, we had 5 miles of alleys in the city that were gravel, and we are now replacing with concrete. And as you can imagine, trees are encroaching in that right of way. We had a very healthy, happy oak that was, bottom line was going to be a problem. And we met with Mike, and when it came time, we put some exploration dollars into the contract so that we could carefully excavate around the trees, see where the roots, and then being able to relay the just to protect the roots instead of just cutting them and just working through that and putting in different material around that tree when we built that alley, kind of babying it.
But like the Stockholm soil, or Connecticut University type soil.
And we also had we experimented. We annually have a sidewalk replacement project where we go out and obviously sidewalk panels, roots, heave them, but we did that on one of those as well, just to again, cutting the roots is going to make them weaker. Cutting the roots could, what happened with the University of Minnesota study, the big wind comes up, they no longer have that structure. And so we've been looking at doing that as well when we were working around the trees as a part of our sidewalk replacement program, where we'll be, deliberate about the roots, maybe bring it up, bring it down, whatever the case may be, so that we can protect and that tree will thrive. We always talk about it, trying to make sure that the trees will thrive after we leave. I mean, construction is hard.
Yeah, it is.
It's a harsh space anyway for the boulevard trees, but then you come in and you're like putting in curb, and even if you don't
compacting class 5.
So, and just working on that, and we're working with the forester also on requiring tree protection fencing around our trees, and making sure nothing gets stored so that additional compaction happens. So again, we're not perfect, but we're trying to find ways to work
you can't be perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, like Richard said, we have infrastructure that we're trying to maintain. We have infrastructure that we have in place to support our society, our way of life. And trees are part of that. Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. But, when you have to dig 30 feet down to get to a sewer line.
Or if you have a water main that needs to be replaced, and those boulevard trees are exactly the wrong place for the safety of having that happen. Yeah.
I'm sure back in the original days of Robbinsdale, when they put in the services, both the water and the sanitary, there must have been an X that marked the spot, and, and the person who planted the tree thought, that's where I plant the tree, because inevitably they all coincide, and it's very difficult.
Yeah.
So.
Well, good. Well, so that was a good, interesting episode, technology and city forestry. And then we'll touch quickly on the smart cities efforts, Jim Elberk and John Holden from the City of Raleigh. That one, I'm still just really impressed with the commitment that the City of Raleigh is making towards these, software and technology initiatives. I mean, they have a staff, for this innovation.
They almost talked about it as like an R&D department.
Right.
I mean, and I thought that, and I often think about it, stop thinking like a city.
Yep.
We're fortunate in Minnesota that we have the local road research board. And I always call the local road research board our R&D.
Yep.
In a portion, 0.5% of the gas tax goes towards this. And the money just goes into studies to make us smarter, to try things out and everything else. But to have that at a city level, and not being afraid to fail.
Yep.
And just trying different things and all the above. I thought it was very interesting. But what I really enjoyed, I didn't know the Smart Cities Conference was free.
Yeah, if you're a government employee, you still have to get out there and pay for a hotel. but there's no registration.
And
cost.
I was actually, when I was listening, I checked my schedule. I can't go, but
Yeah, it's in like 2 weeks, by the way.
But I thought that's how great, and I just loved their attitude of, we just want people to have these conversations, to start talking about it, and it's so true, you know. And I think Richard and I are in a group of a networking group called the West Metro Engineers, and I always tell people the reason we do it is so that we don't know what we don't know until we're talking about it, and we can always be stronger together. There's nothing there's very few things that somebody else hasn't encountered. And sometimes we can really fix things, or at least talk through things at that meeting. And that's really what they're talking about, is that talking through things, you know, having cohorts, having those conversations is so important. You know, it was very neat. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting, particularly from the perspective of like Jim and his colleagues and staff are, you know, really GIS people. And, you know, it's just kind of like telling the GIS people, go think beyond GIS. You know, I mean, use GIS as your foundation and that for some of these things, but, you know, think we've got all this data. What can we do with this data, and how can we collect more data? And yeah, just this environment of really, you know, inspiration and inspiring innovation, I thought was really impressive. And, you know, the traffic camera thing that they came up with is really interesting. And some could say, well, there are other products out there that could do that, you know, market ready products. But what's cool about this is it was kind of homegrown. And I don't know that they would have used a product like that had they not done it in-house on their own, you know?
Well, there's some, I mean, at the core, a lot of times, you know, your needs might be a little different, or you know, the out of the box, whatever it is, may not exactly have what you want to use it for. And every software program has different bells and whistles and things that they can and can't do. But to be able to say, this is what we need, this is how we can access it, and being given that license to be able to just run with it. You know, I've seen our GIS people develop dashboards, which are just mind blowing when you can kind of just customize those and allow them to happen. And we're doing more and more of that so that the data is more digestible. Easy to access,
more relevant. Yeah,
we have a housing dashboard on our website that shows all the units that have been built. You know, how many parking stalls, how many EV charging stations, what year were they built, what is the bedroom you count in the units, and you think about that ability. You know, that was customized, and this is the same thing that they're doing, is to be able to say, this is what we need, this is what we want to use it for. I think there is some elegance to that.
Yeah.
So we're not that. For a smart city, I'll be happy when all of my lift stations and other infrastructure, my parks, buildings, and everything are connected by fiber. That will be a really good start for me. We're working on that. We're not quite there yet, but
well, yeah, and I think it's a really valid point. You know, smart city means different things to different people and to different agencies and things like that. And to your point, I mean, at some point, it's just a matter of starting small, you know, just making those connections, having that data connection to all of your facilities and such.
Well, honestly, it starts with throwing some conduit in the ground when you're doing street reconstructions. Conduit is cheap. Yeah,
and then you blow the fiber through there at some point. It's a lot cheaper than plowing it through later.
For sure.
Yeah, but it comes down to, Richard, it's like you said, you'll be happy. It's smart cities and resources is really the challenge. You know, I've been telling I had been telling when we were doing AV and connected vehicles, connected infrastructure. So, you know, doing the connected vehicles.
CAV.
When I was I was just on a panel and we were talking about it, and they're like, well, it's just real easy. You just have to put the controller in, and, you know, but I said, but you don't understand. I've got signal controllers that are 30 years old and they won't be replaced again for 30 years. And looking at the resource part on that, sometimes that's the challenge, that's the barrier. And but the basics are important. Getting fiber connected, SCADA, you know, having an asset management, you know, whatever, it's a spreadsheet or whatever it is. Getting those are smart city things too. You know,
and those are things that you need to really move up to the next
elevate,
level.
Yeah, I mean,
of
the
smart cities.
basic GIS as we know it is the thin end of the wedge.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, I truly would love to have flow monitors in strategic locations in my sanitary sewers, all connected up to live feedback. So we can monitor what goes on in a storm event. We can monitor what goes on at different times of days. To me, that would be sensational.
Yep.
Not there yet.
Right.
Well, but we've been talking about, so we have R2s. So when we're doing our construction, we will have a GPS point where the services connected to the water main. We'll collect it before it gets covered. We'll get the box as well, and that'll be part of our data gathering. Yep. But we were just had this aha moment with the lead service lines. You know, why don't we take a picture too? You know, because it's that need to be able to have a documented what's the city side, what's the resident side. It's open. So now we're starting to collect. We were just talking about this the last 2 months. So just building on.
You can never have enough data.
Yeah. And how do you access this? How do you work? Actually, we're getting a GoPro. If you can imagine, we're getting a GoPro camera to be able to inspect manholes and not have to go into them.
Now the question is, what will your staff do with the GoPro when they're not shooting lead service lines, or service lines?
But those are some of the things that my staff are coming to me with and saying, "Hey,
sure,
can we do this? It would be so much easier because the dog houses, being able to get down there, having a light on it. You don't have to do confined entry." So
make sure you get the cover that protects the
don't drop it.
Right. They are waterproof. Cool. Well, I think I heard another segue in there because you mentioned that, it's a matter of resources. And when we were downstairs waiting for Richard to show up, you quoted one of my other guests. And what was the quote?
The quote, again, this is Sean Kershaw he's the St. Paul Public Works Director. And it's just so true. We have amazing staff. So again, we've got really good it's not an engineering problem. It's a resource problem. When you look at the infrastructure that's out there, and what I was sharing with Mark before we came up, currently right now, the city of St. Louis Park is having conversations with our city council regarding capital planning and how we approach. And our approach for the last 20 years, because in 2004 was when we first started doing our pavement management program, has been to let the pavement condition drive. And really, when the road needs to be rebuilt, then we'll look at everything underneath and make determination if things need to be rebuilt. Looking at water main breaks, all of the above. Well, we had a eye-opening experience in 2022, 2 years ago, a failure of our water main that got into the sanitary sewer and affected 55 homes. And we really started asking, how should we be doing this differently? Should we be looking at this differently? How can we do this differently? So in the course of the last year, we've completed a HDR. Should I do plugs? Anyway, HDR assisted us, a consultant. A consultant assisted.
We can replace that with Bolton. Yes.
Put together a utility risk assessment, just taking a look at our water and our sanitary sewer system. First and foremost, to look at likelihood of failure, looking at the age of the pipes, looking at water main break history, looking at pipe materials, and then the consequence of failure, which is who does it serve? Is it a large main? Is it the size? All of those things, and then putting together that risk number. The higher the number, the higher the risk. And then using that, so we were going to be presenting this to the city council in early May. The report's done, and just talking about how that could be a driving factor. So not just pavements, looking at if we have a high risk water main, prioritizing that, adding to that, and having some additional criteria being placed into our capital planning for streets. It could be, we've been kind of just thinking about water main, sanitary sewer. Is there flooding? The pavement condition. Is there safety? Safety would be a big one. Race equity. Building different criteria and then developing a new capital plan.
So tell me, what's the average age of your underground utilities in St. Louis Park?
Oh, so the majority, 70% of our water main was installed in the 50s and the 50s, 60s, the boom, right after the war. So, I mean, when you look at the numbers for sanitary and water, we were a post-World War II. Yeah. I got to make sure I'm telling which one. And we were everywhere, houses everywhere, lots of growth. And that there's that growth. And then we've been really living in this space of dividends. It's new. It's only 50 years old.
Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, Bolton & Mink, who is producing and editing our podcasts.
At Bolton & Mink, we believe all people should live in a safe, sustainable, and beautiful community. We promise every client 2 things. We'll work hard for you, and we'll do a good job. We take a personal interest in the work being done around us. And at the end of the day, we're real people offering real solutions.
And so our message to the council is that, first and foremost, we have this risk, the more breaks you have, there's a logarithmic scale, one break and it'll start happening sooner and sooner and closer and closer together. But we also have this life cycle conversation. So, we have a balloon payment coming, and how do you flatten that curve? How do you work through that? So those are the 2 things that we're going to be talking to the council about. Sanitary sewer is important, but there's with lining, and you guys can help me out with this. When you have a vitrified clay pipe and it's in good shape, it's still flowing, it's it doesn't have any offsets, it's not cracked, you can line it and you can help with flattening that curve. I've heard 50 years you can add to a pipe, but is that just an estimate, whatever the case may be. So we've been talking about that.
And that's part of the problem with some of these newer technologies is
they've
only been around for 20 years.
Yep.
So how are we supposed to know if they're going to be 40, 50, 60, 70 year
Well,
olds?
it's like the LED lights, right? They tell us they're going to last 100 and something thousand hours, but half of them are already starting to go purple.
Valid point.
What's going on with that?
Purple. We have purple lights
Purple
now.
lights.
And I think that was intentional.
Yeah,
for Prince.
It's Minnesota.
Yeah.
So the reality is looking at that, and or if you're going to choose to replace a high risk water main, sanitary is right there. Might as well do it too. But at the core is once we get that idea, that mapping out, you got to find the money, and that's not going to happen overnight. Utility rates have to be set. And bringing that through. Is it I always say things as the mama bear, the papa bear, and the baby bear. You replace everything. You keep on doing what you've been doing. You got to find that middle ground that's just right. But that's the journey we're going to be taking in St. Louis Park over the next year.
That's interesting. I mean, most of my underground infrastructure was post World War One.
Wow.
Some of it is experience, or will be enjoying its centenary coming up here very shortly.
Well, happy birthday.
Yeah. A lot of the water mains are only 4-inch.
Oofda.
So it doesn't make sense to me to be pandering around with that stuff. The old clay tile sanitary sewer was put in by WPA during the day, and if you send a camera down it wiggles everywhere. So that's not the sort of thing I would bother trying to line, So for me, my underground assets are what's driving my program.
Yeah.
So we get out there. We're 20 years into it, 20 years into what should be about a 50-year program. So far we're holding the line. We haven't sent the city broker or anything like that. But working our way through that with all the other fun stuff that happens on the side. So
and we're not alone. I mean, you mentioned, you kind of had probably a smaller World War I boom, but certainly a very large, it's not called the baby boomer generation for nothing, but a very large building boom after World War II. And a lot of communities across the United States are in that situation. And so we are at a really critical time for our infrastructure where infrastructure is failing. And if you don't have some sort of comprehensive plan to address it, you're in pure reaction mode. And then you're just going to have all of these catastrophes, really.
And I will say one thing that we did find out is that we have 7 miles of water main in our CIP between last year and this year replacement. And when we've got the risk, those were all high risk water. For the most part, they this whole exercise, the decision trees we've been doing have been successful. Using the brake data and everything else as being a way to make those decisions. But it's just, we may not get at other ones. But yeah, it's been really interesting. I've learned a lot about our infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, just getting back to Sean Kershaw, he's in St. Paul and they're a little worse because, they had a boom in the early 1900s, so they're 10, 20 years ahead of you on a lot of their infrastructure and have a lot of issues. And they're are you dealing with a lot of lead service? I think we touched on this in the last one, but you're not dealing with much for lead service line?
One lead service.
Okay.
Yeah, you had said you'd had a really great inventory, if I remember right.
Yeah, we replaced our water meters in 2019 and we had the thought to collect that data as they were putting in the new water meter.
Yeah.
So we have that.
Yeah. St. Paul, Minneapolis, not as lucky. So, Sean talked a little bit about St. Paul Water actually is not a part of St. Paul Public Works. It's a separate agency. The utility is, but that was one of the things we touched on. But touch more about their new street rehabilitation program funded by a new sales tax and some things like that. But did you guys have any other takeaways from Mr. Kershaw? He's a really interesting individual.
I think I've talked about this before. I think it is so important that you get out and you shadow.
Yeah.
And
as a leader,
Yep. To really go out, shadow, learn what your staff's, learn what the challenges are. And I thought it was great that he has a CDL.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that fascinating. And just that, in St. Louis Park, we've encouraged other departments to shadow even other departments.
Yeah.
Because I've gone out with the police department just to see what it takes to do. And if you ever sat with a cop writing a ticket for running a stop sign, it takes 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at that process and that, the time, and meanwhile, there's 5 other people, or during that 20 minutes, there's 100 other people blowing the stop sign. And, just kind of, it's fascinating to be able to do that. And we ride along with the fire department, responding to calls. But then you can talk about what you have in common. And it's getting back to the North Carolina, Raleigh. People getting to know what is important to engineering, getting to know what's important for public works, getting to know what's important for fire, police, finance, planning, whatever the case may be. And but that's what I thought. I reflected on that quite a bit.
That's interesting because when I was an undergraduate doing internships at different cities, I went to a rural shire. A shire. Lots of shires.
Were there serfs in the shire?
There weren't.
No.
So, it was a 4-hour drive west of Sydney. And I was fairly green at that time, as you could imagine. My job was to construct roads. Okay, so this was a pretty cool local government unit because they had their own construction equipment, and for a young engineer still going through the course to see all these graders and scrapers and bulldozers, this is fun. Well, the guys encouraged me to get into the machines and try doing what they do. Yeah. And it gives you a really good insight at how good those guys are. Because this was back in the day where you didn't have the joystick or anything. You had, 10 handles in that grader to adjust that blade and all the rest. And you're doing about a mile at a time, and you're giving them 5 points, across the formation, and they go through there and you resurvey, and dang, you guys are good. Mm-hmm. So it's just fascinating to have that experience, and then you don't have unrealistic expectations of the guys, the operators, because you know how challenging it is to get that stuff nuts on.
Yeah.
And I want to be invited to his backyard.
Yes. I think we're all going to have to.
Well, what?
Sean has this concert, annual concert.
That sounded real cool.
I was like, how do I get invited to that?
Yeah.
So,
I'm
Sean, if you're listening.
I'm struggling with the name of it now, but it's like
Oak.
Yes.
The Old Oak Opera or something like that.
Yeah.
But
yes, that sounds right. But I'm just saying, Sean, if you're listening.
Grand Oak Opera, I think is what they call it. But yes, that sounds really cool, and I look forward to to trying that. I believe his schedule for the summer is up on that website. So check it out. If you're in Minnesota, check it out or come visit us. Yeah, Sean's a really, really interesting guy. And, I think one of the more interesting things is, he was a planner way back in the day, and then did some work with some nonprofits and some things like that. And he said he'd always been, this public works nerd, and finally got this job. And I think he really has a passion for it, which I think is great. So I'm glad he's my public works director in St. Paul. Mm-hmm. So moving on to the last episode we'll talk about today, and that is Chris Evers talked about innovative technology and pavement management. And I found Chris via the APWA top 10 public works leaders for 2023. He was only my second one out of 10. I'm not doing real well on a batting average on that one. But Chris is, a pretty funny guy, pretty nice guy, but and one of the rare private sector honorees for that. But some interesting things that he talked about.
I am fascinated by this clear coating for the smog.
Yeah, smog-eating roads.
Smog-eating roads.
Titanium oxide.
And I was thinking to myself, and again, we're all talking about greenhouse gas emissions. Yep. We're all talking about, that's we have a climate action plan. St. Louis Park is probably one of the most aggressive climate action plans in the state, and carbon neutral by 2040. And you look at, how long does it last? Especially in winter, that's, for those of you listening, if you live in Minnesota, first and foremost, you'll always hear, but will it work here? And then, then I thought, what if we coated cars in something like this? And I started just going down this rabbit hole with that, but I was pretty fascinated.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little skeptical. I did some reading on it, but it was all their literature. I haven't found any third-party literature on it yet, but I haven't dug too hard on it either, admittedly. But I mean, it's a really interesting premise, like you said, as we look to try to counter these emissions or capture them or get rid of them. Yeah. And it, it's combined with their rejuvenation product, and in which is a clear coat product that they spray on. It's like a translucent fog seal. Woodbury has used it. It's called Reclamite. I mean, I'm sure a couple other communities.
Golden Valley does.
Golden Valley's done it, yeah. And apparently Edina has a stretch of road that has this smog-eating road treatment on it too. So it was a Min Road test project. I don't know what road it was. I don't know what kind of road it was.
Edina?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to call Chad.
I know. I should have done that before this episode. But got to figure out what road that is, and I don't know, go measure the emissions or something. I don't know.
It reminded me that on 35W, so when the bridge was rebuilt, they put in 30-foot tall pollution sucking sculptures, so that if there's these
that look like the river.
Yeah. And those are supposedly, in my understanding, is they're actually supposed to be cleaning the air.
How?
And I'm looking it up right now. But besides mimicking the look of the Mississippi River as it passed through Minneapolis, the new sculptures are made from a type of concrete that is photocatalytic, meaning it will be able to convert gases like carbon monoxide, nitrous oxides, and other sulfur dioxide to higher oxidized states, making them less damaging in the environment. Another benefit of the new concrete mixture, it never looks old as it maintains a white oxidized color in its outer skin.
Say that word again?
Photocatalyc.
Photocatalyc. That was our nerd word of the day for that episode.
Yep, it was.
So this whole titanium oxide thing uses this photocatalyc process. So it's the sun hitting this chemical or what have you, this surface, and triggering this chemical reaction that does that, and that's really interesting. So it would be interesting to hear, and that's one of those things. It's like it's really difficult to how do you measure this?
Oh yeah.
How do you measure any of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the flow meters or whatever. How do you measure any of this? And the white papers are so important.
Yeah.
But even like I was talking about, we have these filters for getting phosphorus out.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you measure how much?
Right.
You don't. I can't report out. It's just the expected.
Get out there now and start measuring your inflow.
I'll go right when I get back to the office.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
go hang out, skate park.
There you go. I could see you doing that.
So I mean, it was really, it'll be interesting to watch that, to see how many other communities are use that, and if there are some third-party studies or something on that to try to measure the effectiveness and such on that. And he also mentioned that there was some pavement temperature benefits to it and things like that as well. So very interesting.
Yeah, I mean that whole urban heat island.
Yep.
Is something else. And trees are important for
yep.
that to keep to shade pavements. But if this is something else that could do that,
yeah. All right. Well, those were the 4 episodes. I was gonna. I thought I'd mention a couple of topics for our conversation today, and one of those was going to be PFAS. There, the EPA did set some new limits and standards for these PFAS chemicals, but I'm just going to simply commit to bringing in an expert on PFAS and talk about that in a future episode. But I did want to ask Richard, like when you have a brand new nationally award-winning water treatment plant, we'll add sound effects to that for that, some trumpet sounds or something.
Excellent.
My producer bows his head. Come on, Mark.
Did we?
Did you talk about that at all?
No, because at the time, you got to remember that the planning for this was so many years ago.
Yeah.
And you got to also remember that the way they've changed the limits for PFAS, it's orders of magnitude different.
Yes. I mean, now it's basically if you detect it, you have to treat it.
So no, we didn't.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of looking around at the moment to see, well, what can we do about this?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty low limit, and some of my wells are right on the cusp.
Mm-hmm.
So we just got to be prepared.
Yeah.
And investigate different ways of taking this on to make sure that we remain in compliance.
Yeah. There are a lot of communities that are in a similar situation as you. They're on the cusp. Part of the issue is that these chemicals are leaching through our aquifers and groundwater systems and that, and so it's moving. It's moving through the system.
Well, it is. The thing that I'm kind of a bit concerned about is where are we at in that leaching through the system? Are we at the start of it? Are we in the middle of it? Or are we at the end of it?
Right.
mm-hmm.
Because by bringing this rule down, you're committing a lot of agencies to spending a lot of money, not only for capital costs, but for maintenance costs, operation costs. And if we're going to see a decline in that number, in a couple of years, well, what's the sense of that?
Yeah.
The other thing that annoys the blazes out of me is, and I've spoken to people in the Department of Health about this, is, what is the ratio of the PFAS intake that an average person gets from their chip packets and their cosmetics and things like that versus the intake
Drinking
they get
water.
from their water?
Yep.
Well, before they changed the standard, it was something like 25 to 1. So what is it now? Like 500 to 1? It just doesn't make sense to me. We should be going after the bigger number.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know Minnesota has made some efforts to remove, PFAS from the industry, the sources of PFAS. And I'm not sure where we are in that, because I know it was staged. I don't know if they're done with it,
I think
or
there's
if they
still some deadlines coming up
Yep.
in 2025, I think.
Yeah, but it's a valid point, and I know there's some information out there about holding these manufacturers responsible. 3M had a big settlement with the state of Minnesota about that, but holding other manufacturers responsible for it. But how much money are we going to need if every water treatment plant out there is going to need a reverse osmosis system or
granulated carbon or
right,
whatever the
I mean there's some other foam thing
IX
that I was reading about. I mean, you're going to need very expensive treatment procedures at every water treatment plant at some point, given these levels.
or at the wellheads.
Yeah. So anyway, something to keep an eye on. And like I said, I will bring an expert on that. I just wanted to also kind of touch on, and we're getting close to the end of the episode here, but the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse in March in Baltimore. And, obviously it was very unfortunate. The 6 people, they lost 6 people at least from that, and they were maintenance workers on the bridge, but they were able to close the bridge to the public before it collapsed, which is great. But, obviously it brings back a memory of the 35W bridge collapsing here in Minnesota, in Minneapolis in 2007. Just kind of memories of that. I mean, just how shocking that was. I mean, you were starting to say, you were at a planning commission meeting?
Yeah, so it was a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we were at a planning commission meeting, and one of our planning commissioners worked for MnDOT emergency operations.
Oh.
And his phone, to the point where when
up.
I found, so I wasn't always up front. We were usually sat in the audience, and I pulled him aside and said, "Hey, the bridge collapsed. The 35W bridge collapsed." And he's like, "What?" And I just remember that. But for those of you, I mean, this is a bridge that I drive over all the time.
Yep.
This bridge was one that I drive over all the time. I worked in Roseville at the time, and live in South Minneapolis. And so depending on where I was, what mood I was in, I would at times take the 35W bridge home. And it collapsed, rush hour.
Yeah.
And you look at it, and it was bridges aren't supposed to fall.
No.
In the United States, in a nation that, bridges aren't supposed to fall. And, it drew the attention to our infrastructure, the resources. We've been talking about this, the infrastructure, the grades. We've been trying to tell that story, with the make the grade and everything else, the state of the grade for the nation's infrastructure. But the unfortunate thing is that here we are again. And granted, this one, got hit, but it was a different circumstance. But there was so much energy at that time when the 35W bridge collapsed about putting more money into bridges. I don't think that really got to where it needed to go.
Right.
You know what I mean?
In Minnesota, I think it definitely had an impact on our ability to replace bridges.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
There was definitely commitment.
It was actually, quite the political story, and it's part of political lore now in Minnesota. The following year, Democratic House, Senate, Republican Senate, and a Republican governor, and they were able to pass a transportation bill that included the first gas tax increase in Minnesota since 1988. So it had been almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the governor vetoed it, and 6 Republicans went against their party and voted to override the veto. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like I said, it's part of political lore now in Minnesota, but that got done. And as a result, we had an 8.5 cent increase in our gas tax, and most of that was went to pay off bonds to replace bridges, and we had a surge of bridges that were replaced. Now we're still, I think, chasing deficient bridges, structurally deficient bridges. I think the number of fracture critical bridges is very, very low right now, but we're still chasing that. according to one website I'm looking at here, at least in 2023, 4% of the bridges in Minnesota were in a poor condition. But that's, the U.S. average is 6.8%. And there are some states where West Virginia, 20% of the bridges are in poor condition. That's just scary to me. Iowa, which I do a lot of driving in Iowa, 19% of the bridges are in poor condition. So there's still a lot of work to do there across our country. And, and we also have to recognize that the federal government classifies a bridge as like a culvert that's over, 10 feet in length? What is it?
Well, it's
a bridge?
I think it's 10 feet. So for perfect example, there's a culvert in Roseville, I think has 2 bridges.
Right.
They're both culverts.
Yep.
And they're both a pipe underneath the road.
Yeah. And so, if those fail, the risk to the public is not huge. And so most of Iowa's are probably something like that. They definitely have a lot of river crossings, but well,
when something like that happens, and you realize how many times you actually are on a bridge.
Right.
Usually when you're driving, you're paying attention to the traffic and everything else. But now that I commute from Minneapolis to the West Metro, that whole section of 394 coming off of 94 is all elevated bridges. And it just thinking about that, and how critical, you don't miss it till it's gone,
right?
It's just like all of what we do, we make normal happen. You don't notice these things until they're not working or they're not there.
Well, that's a really good point, because going back to this Baltimore Harbor Bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, it collapses in a major harbor. There was a ship there were ships out there that are still waiting. Like, they showed up. There was one that just went through yesterday that had been waiting for a month. After, until they cleared enough of the channel for that a boat that size could get through. And then, not to mention the impact to the transportation side of it too. It was the only crossing of that harbor. And so now all that traffic's got to go around the other side. Like you said, you don't know what you have, you don't miss it. You don't even think of the impact it's going to have if it's not there until it is gone. So yeah, it just gets. It's a constant message that we have. It's something as public works professionals we deal with every day. This whole concept of balancing the needs with the resources that we have, and we're always. It seems like we're always asking for more money. We're never satisfied. We get money, and the next year we're asking for more money. But the fact of the matter is, it gets back to that conversation of our infrastructure is at that 50, 60, 70-year-old level, and it's just getting to that critical point of we've got so much more to replace than we have the priority of funding it.
Well, and at times, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer. And only I get to use that. But from my perspective, every time I start thinking about this, and and again working, I've told you this journey that we're going to be going on with our CIP. I have to sit back and say, you know what? It just takes time. It took it in recognizing, looking back how much we have done, and looking forward, saying 10 years from now, I'll be able to say that that's done or this is done. It's like you said, the 20 years for your 50 years.
Looking at the map we have,
we'll get there.
All the roads we've done, we shade in a light grey, and the amount of city that we've covered already, very satisfying. Very satisfying.
And then even to the point where if there has to be a limited amount of resource, there has to be that balance, but making sure you have the funding moving forward is so critical. And that's what the sales tax that St. Paul did. We've got a council that really believes in funding infrastructure and working through that. But we also have to reflect that, you can't rip up every road in the city.
No.
Or you can't replace.
Not at the same time.
Not at the same time. Well, you can eventually, but people still have to get around.
Some people think you do.
I know, yeah. And we do really plan. And I know that it may seem like we don't, but Hennepin County, if they're doing something, we're not going to do a parallel route. MnDOT and everything else, trying to, if Golden Valley or Edina, we actually do partner on those things and make sure that the clear detours are going to be there. And that's another part. And then, people, every one of these projects affect not only the driving public, but they affect the businesses, the residents on that, and having a staff person, a field person, making sure it's being done appropriately, right, and according to the way it was supposed to be designed. You need twice the amount of staff, you're doing twice the amount of work, and those are all part of this math problem, this resource. Yeah. That's why you say resource. It's not necessarily always just money. Yep. Construction fatigue is what we call
construction fatigue. So. Yeah. Well, we're engineers. We're not allowed to have construction fatigue. But hey, well, I think that that'll do it for today.
Okay.
Thanks for another great Unplugged episode. Excellent. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Anything that came to mind, Richard?
No.
All right. Well, thank you. This is a good smaller group. I know Michael Thompson and Mark Ray, neither one of those could join us today. But we will, our next Unplugged episode, we'll have a couple more people, whoever those are. But in the meantime, look for some great episodes. I teased a couple about EAB, and I'm going to find somebody to talk about PFAS, and try to get some other professionals on here to talk about some nerdy things. So thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Mark.
We'll see you guys again. And one last thing before we go, if you have enjoyed this episode and the podcast in general, just help us spread the word. Social media, LinkedIn, what have you. Just tell your friends and tell your enemies too. That's good. That works for me too. Thanks, everybody. Nerds out.